Professor Jaap Visser of the University of Cape Town urged Parliament to give serious consideration to important legislation that was to be high on the agenda during the session. That is the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Bill, a piece of legislation that cuts across all sectors of land use management.
It's a prime example of an Intergovernmental Relations Act. It's a framework for provincial legislation because it will be followed by provincial laws in each province. It's a framework for spatial plans across the three spheres of government, something we have been waiting for such a long time. And it will have serious consequences for local government. Even the internal workings of local government will be impacted by this law because it talks about the imposition of municipal planning tribunals. And this is the example of an act that pulls together almost the entire government in one piece of legislation. And I think all eyes are on Parliament to make sure that this law will become a quality piece of legislation.
We will hear more about the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Bill on Monday when we talk to the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Rural Development and Land Reform. But responding to questions from delegates to the local government seminar, Professor Jaap Visser said research had shown that local government protests were not simply about issues of service delivery. There was in fact more to it.
I'm always the last one to make generic comments on the nature and the reason for these protests. I think each and every protest has a story to it. And sometimes that is a story of naked political opportunism, but sometimes it is a story of real, genuine grievances about service delivery. The one thing I want to say about it is that we are currently doing research on the reasons for protests and doing a very refined analysis of what are people citing, what are media reports citing, and what is the reason why people are protesting, and actually do much more in-depth research on what is the story behind those protests. The one thing I want to lift out from that is what we see a trend over the years is that the complaint about broken promises or a lack of feedback seems to be on the rise quite dramatically. That more and more people are not necessarily citing lack of service delivery or tariffs or evictions, but they're actually citing we're not getting feedback. We submitted a petition, we engaged, and we're hearing for an answer, or we were promised certain things, and the theme of broken promises seems to be something that's on the right. And I think that's problematic, because that points to a lack of communication, which I think the Chair also pointed out, that many of these protests are about feedback, about communication, about being honest with the communities out there.
Mr. Pillay of National Treasury said it was crucial for local governments to have the right people and the right jobs to make municipalities work. A lot had been achieved, but it was now time once again to roll up the sleeves. Councillors, he said, also needed more training. He appealed to councillors to ensure that officials preparing the next round of financial statements were in their offices for the next few months to actually work on those statements.
So during the election period and thereafter, with a huge turnover of councillors, we also need to recognize that those councillors need to be further trained and perhaps repeat training undertaken. So a 1 week's training effort of councillors is just not good enough. There needs to be more energy, more effort, and more exercises built into it. So we think there's more needs to be done there. And Salga, together with the different stakeholders, the COCTA, National Treasury, Provincial Treasury, we can work together to make this work for all of us. I think that will start to improve the big governance arrangement challenges that the Auditor General has raised as well. And by the way, that report is already 12 months dated. So the next cycle of municipal audits are on the go. Municipalities are meant to close out on their accounts now. What we make a plea as well as part of the capacity building effort is to please ensure, councillors, please ensure that those officials that are responsible for the preparing of the AFS, monitoring and managing that process, as well as responding to the Auditor General during this period, right up to November, are actually present at the offices and not out on any other training programs or courses during this time. It is a critical period in the period of accountability in a municipal time frame. So I think if we can please take that message back, it would really help to ensure that people are there at the job when required to be.
The chairperson of the Select Committee on Appropriations, Teboho Chaane, related his committee's experiences when visiting a number of provinces. He said the purpose of the visits was to look at spending on conditional grants to municipalities and what was being done to achieve lean audits by 2014. A major problem was a lack of leadership and that those who did wrong got away with it, even when billions were wasted.
In most instances, you find the leadership of these municipalities failing to take ownership of the decisions. They don't drive the processes of ensuring that municipalities go into the right direction. You find that there is lack of availability of key leaders of the institution each time there are visits, either by parliament or even by the provincial legislature or the AG in most cases. You find also that finding expression in the fact that as and when there is wrongdoing in most municipalities, there's lack of consequences. It is becoming a normal and acceptable practices in most municipalities that you can just do wrong things and nothing will happen. You can even see that when you look at the growing value of irregular expenditure, wasteful and fruitless expenditure. Billions and billions of rands are getting wasted and nothing happens. And there is legislation. The MFA explains thoroughly what should happen when there was a fruitless or irregular expenditure, who should report, and if the MM does not report, what steps should the mayor take. Those things are there in those laws, but nobody cares to follow up and implement those things. That's when we talk about lack of leadership. Because if leadership was there, then some of these things should be implemented without any fear or favor whatsoever.
The biggest problem with municipalities was irregular and wasteful expenditure. At the same time, the failure to collect debts were on the increase. People are simply not paying for services, even in the bigger cities.
Billions and billions of rands, and with those billions, we could have changed a lot of lives, but it's just going to wrong pockets, as Honorable Mashile said earlier on. The issue relating to revenue collection and debt management, I think in the report of SALGA, they made some interesting points about the challenges on revenue, because that is one area that is affecting a lot of municipalities and is now beginning to move into cities as well. I'm not sure what is the situation in the metros, because we're still going to visit metros in a couple of weeks from now, but it is a challenge to an extent that you even find people who are able to pay these services are no longer paying. Some of the things that you find as we engage with the municipalities, you find that there is a lot of people who are now bypassing all these things. They steal electricity, they steal water, and all those things. And these things are known, but some of the municipalities are doing nothing to correct that. And as a result, it impacts negatively on the cash flow of most of the municipalities.
We have more on the seminar on local government after the break. Please stay with us.